The golden sun hovered above the vast African savanna as shimmering waves of heat danced over the dry, tall grass while the wind moved, slowly like a whisper through the trees that stood proud like old giants with their arms stretching across. The sky as birds sang from the canopies, and wild creatures shifted lazily in the underbrush as if the land itself breathed in peace, unaware that something life-changing was about to unfold beneath its calmed surface where near a twisted acacia tree a lioness moved with slow grace, her fur marked by battles, her muscles tight with watchfulness, her eyes following every playful move of her young cub who chased shadows and pounced on leaves, its tail flicking back and forth as it tumbled through dust with joy. And then the earth whispered something darker as the wind changed direction and leaves flew upward like startled birds, and a rumble rolled underfoot, warning of a shift in nature as one of the ancient trees groaned loudly under its own age and snapped with a thunderous crack that ripped through the silence and sent birds soaring in panic. And before the lioness could react, the thick branch collapsed downward like a hammer from the sky, striking the ground with terrifying force where the cub had just been playing, as dust exploded into the air, hiding everything from sight, until a faint cry rose from beneath the wood, a sound so soft and strangled it broke the silence like a tear. The cub had been crushed beneath the fallen branch, its small body pinned between bark and earth, kicking weakly as it whimpered in pain, while the lioness roared and lunged forward, her claws raking the branch, her teeth tearing at the unyielding wood, but it would not move. It held firm like the hand of fate while her child cried beneath it, and she pushed again and again, her strength fading, her breath coming fast, her heart thundering as fear turned to desperation. And then she froze for a moment in hopeless silence. The savanna offered her no allies, no echo, no mercy, until the deep sound emerged from the distant thickets, slow, heavy, and unfamiliar, like the earth itself had begun to walk as a shape broke through the foliage, a broad dark figure wrapped in shadow and muscle, his silver back gleaming in the sun, a gorilla taller than most, with a presence like stone, his eyes deep and distant, as he stepped into the light where the lioness and her cub lay beneath the acacia tree. And for a moment everything stood still as air and dust held their breath, and the lioness stared at him, not with rage, but pain, her body lowered in front of her injured child, her eyes flickering between fear and pleading, and the gorilla, whose name was Bakery, stood unmoving, watching the scene with a face carved by time and memory, because years ago, beneath trees like these, his life had shattered in silence, when a lioness no different from this one had attacked his small family, catching them off guard, and left him screaming into the wind as his mate vanished and his young child lay lifeless beneath branches like these, as he tried to lift the wood, but was too late, too broken, too human in a wild world that showed no forgiveness. And since that day he had vanished into the thorn-covered groves, living in solitude, where even memories refused to follow. But now he stood before the same, seeing the same cry, the same crushing limb, but had chanced to change what had once destroyed him, and the lioness lowered herself beside her cub, pressing her face against its fur, as if to shield it from pain, letting out a low sound that shook with sorrow and not threat, and her body sagged as if the strength had drained from her soul. And Bakery did nothing, only stared, breathing slow and quiet as the wind shifted and memories clawed at his mind. And then he turned his back and walked away, disappearing into the green like a ghost, leaving only silence behind, while the lioness cried again, thinking she had been abandoned again by the world. But Bakery did not go far. Instead, he reached a shaded mound nearby and sat heavily, pressing his hands into the dirt, gripping it as if trying to hold the past, still as flashes of that horrible day returned again and again, the broken cries, the shattered branches, the tiny fingers that never moved, and the helplessness that never left, and the image of the lioness returned to his eyes, not as a predator, but as a mother, and the pain in her eyes mirrored his own. And then the cub's soft cry echoed once more, weaker, but still alive, and Bakery stood slowly turning back toward the clearing, his breath steady, his hands loose but ready, and the lioness looked up as his shadow appeared again through the trees. And this time she did not move. She did not growl. She only waited and hoped and watched as he stepped toward the fallen branch, slow and deliberate, as the earth seemed to quiet around him, and the light filtered through the trees like a spotlight, sent from the sky, and he dropped to one knee beside the branch, planting his fists into the ground, inhaling deep as his body tightened, his arms shook with tension, and the lioness nudged her cub, again gently whispering with her eyes that the time had come, and Bakery growled from deep in his chest as he pushed upward with every fiber of his being the massive limb, groaning in protest as it lifted inch by inch under his strength, and the cub dragged itself forward, scraping across the ground, inch by inch, until its tiny frame slipped free, just as Bakery let the branch crash back into the dirt with a booming finality that echoed across the trees and startled the birds above as dust rose and then settled again, revealing a trembling cub cradled beneath its mother's body, weak but breathing and alive. And then came the distant hum of an engine as a ranger vehicle crawled through the brush, cutting a path toward the scene, and Elijah Manji, behind the wheel, lifted his binoculars. With shaking hands, seeing what no one had ever expected to see, a lioness crouched over her cub and a silverback gorilla standing silently nearby, not as an enemy, but as something else. And Elijah stopped the engine, stepped out slowly, his eyes wide, and his hands steady, and the lioness looked at him, then at Bakery, and stepped aside with calm grace, not out of fear, but respect. And Elijah knelt beside the cub, whispering quietly as he examined its ribs and saw the injuries, and lifted his radio, speaking with urgency for medical help. And Bakery began to back away, step by step, never looking away from the cub. Elijah carefully placed it in a soft sling and laid it inside the truck, with the lioness following close behind, saying nothing, making no sound, only walking with purpose and trust as the vehicle pulled away, kicking up dust. And Bakery stood alone once more at the edge of the trees, his breath steady and his heart lighter than it had been in years. And the wind returned to the savannah, and the birds sang again, and the trees stood tall as they always had. But something had changed, because in a world ruled by survival, something unexpected had happened. Forgiveness had stepped forward. Pain had been answered not with rage but with compassion, and where there had once been only loss, now there was redemption. As Bakery turned and walked back to his hollow, where bones still lay, but where healing had begun, and the lioness disappeared into the horizon behind. Truck, her eyes fixed forward, her silence filled with meaning, and her steps steady like a guardian's vow, and far away in that quiet grove, Bakery sat beneath the crooked limbs of his past, closed his eyes, and for the first time in seasons let himself feel peace, not sorrow, because he had chosen to act not in anger, but in hope, not in memory, but in mercy. And that choice had made all the difference. And if this story touched something in your heart, if it reminded you that even in the harshest places kindness can still grow, then share this moment with someone who needs it, because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is forgive what hurt you and help what needs you, and maybe the world would be a better place if more hearts chose to lift instead of walk away.